war, barbed wire, tunnels carved by desperate hands. Hollywood has immortalized The Great Escape and Stalag 17. But what about the films time forgot? The daring prison break stories left buried in the archives. These are the unsung escape thrillers of World War II, ingenious, emotional, and neglected. Today, we unearth them. Which one deserves its comeback most? 12. The Wooden Horse, 1950. Long before Steve McQueen revved a motorcycle over barbed wire, British cinema offered a quieter, ingenious escape story. The Wooden Horse. Released in 1950, this was no blockbuster. It was a modest production, based directly on real events at Stalag Luft III, the same camp later dramatized in The Great Escape. But where Hollywood turned the tale into spectacle, The Wooden Horse honored the subtlety of human willpower. The film's conceit is almost laughably simple. Prisoners hide a tunnel beneath a makeshift gymnastic horse, carrying it daily into the yard where men perform vaulting exercises while underneath, dirt is quietly smuggled out. The tension builds not from gunfire, but from silence, the scrape of spoons in the soil, the pounding heartbeat when guards walk past. Audiences at the time praised its authenticity, though some critics found it too subdued compared to other war dramas. Yet its very restraint gives it power. There are no grand speeches or flashy heroics. Instead, we watch ordinary men risking everything with ordinary tools. That truth made it resonate with actual veterans who recognized their own experiences on screen. Though overshadowed by its louder successor, The Wooden Horse influenced generations of escape cinema. Its pacing, its focus on ingenuity rather than violence, can be felt even in modern thrillers. Forgotten by casual audiences, it remains one of the purest distillations of the prison escape genre. And as you watch, you realize, sometimes the quietest escapes are the bravest. 11. Albert R.N., 1953. In the early 1950s, another British war film emerged, carrying an equally clever idea. Albert R.N. This time, it wasn't about tunneling beneath wire, but about deceiving it. The film dramatizes the ingenious creation of a life-size dummy named Albert, constructed by Royal Navy prisoners to fool German guards during roll call. Imagine the audacity, a figure cobbled together from scraps of uniforms, wires, and papier-mâché, standing silently at attention while real men slip away. It was the kind of low-tech brilliance that only desperation and imagination could produce. The film captures this mix of comedy and danger beautifully. Every scene with Albert teeters between absurdity and tension. Upon release, Albert R.N. was warmly received in Britain, though never exported widely enough to achieve global recognition. Its cast of then-rising stars, including Anthony Steele, lent it credibility, while veterans once again applauded the film's grounded detail. But in the shadow of larger productions, it slowly faded from public memory. Today, it feels ripe for rediscovery. The concept of creating a ghost prisoner has since become a staple of escape narratives, from Colditz stories to modern prison dramas. But Albert R.N. was one of the first to put it on screen. The film reminds us that escape wasn't just about strength or speed, it was about outsmarting the system. And sometimes, survival depended on a papier-mâché friend named Albert. 10. Danger Within, 1959. By the late 1950s, audiences thought they had seen it all: tunnels, dummies, ropes, and forged documents. Then came Danger Within, a British-Italian production that dared to twist the formula. Instead of merely showing the ingenuity of POWs, it blended escape drama with murder mystery. Set in an Italian prisoner camp, the story follows a group of Allied officers plotting their breakout, only to find their plans constantly sabotaged. But why? And by whom? Suspicion spreads. Is there a traitor in their midst? When one officer turns up dead, the stakes soar beyond freedom. The prisoners must solve a murder while still trying to escape. The film's release was modest, praised for its tension but criticized for its grimness compared to the patriotic tone of earlier POW films. Yet that darkness is exactly what makes it fascinating today. Danger Within exposes the psychological strain of captivity, showing how mistrust can be as deadly as barbed wire. While not a household name, the film stands as one of the most unique escape thrillers of its era. Its whodunit structure was years ahead of its time, foreshadowing the hybrid genre blends that dominate modern streaming thrillers. In an age where audiences crave both crime and war drama, Danger Within feels like a film waiting for rediscovery. As the credits roll, you're left wondering, what's more dangerous, being trapped by enemies or being betrayed by friends? 9. The Colditz Story, 1955. For decades, Colditz Castle in Germany was synonymous with the escape-proof prison. Officers who had already tried and failed elsewhere were shipped here, the Nazis' last stop for uncontainable men. In 1955, British cinema brought this legend to the screen in The Colditz Story, a film that quickly became a cult favorite among veterans but slipped into the shadows of bigger Hollywood spectacles. Unlike many prison escape films, this one isn't about a single scheme. It's about the relentless ingenuity of men facing a fortress designed to break their spirits. We watch as British and Allied officers map out elaborate plans, false walls, disguises, stolen uniforms, and silent rehearsals. Every attempt fails, but instead of despair, the film highlights the unshakable persistence of these men. Based on the memoir of Pat Reed, a real escape officer at Colditz, the film has an unusual authenticity. The sets, the uniforms, even the claustrophobic corridors all resonate with veterans who had been there. Critics at the time admired its craftsmanship, though some noted its lack of glamour compared to American war films. That lack of glamour is exactly what makes it powerful today. While The Great Escape turned POW ingenuity into Hollywood myth, The Colditz Story kept it close to the bone, reminding audiences that most attempts ended in failure. But even in failure, there was dignity. Forgotten in the rush of post-war cinema, it remains one of the most realistic portraits of Colditz and deserves a modern restoration. Watching it today, you're left with a truth. Sometimes survival itself was the greatest act of rebellion. 8. The Password is Courage, 1962. Where many WWII escape films lean into tension, The Password is Courage leans into audacity. Released in 1962, it starred Dirk Bogarde as Charles Coward, a real-life British soldier who earned a reputation as one of the most daring and cheekiest escape artists of the war. This wasn't a man content with one attempt. He escaped again and again, each time bolder than before. The film dramatizes Coward's exploits with a mix of tension and humor. At times, it feels like a caper rather than a grim war story. Coward not only tries to escape but also smuggles messages, sabotages enemy operations, and plays psychological games with his captors. Bogarde's performance injects charm into what could have been a straightforward drama, making audiences root for his mischief as much as his bravery. At release, the film didn't ignite international fame, partly because it balanced comedy with wartime realism, a tonal mix that puzzled some critics. Yet that blend is exactly what makes it stand out today. In a genre often dominated by bleakness or patriotic solemnity, The Password is Courage shows that defiance sometimes came with laughter and that humor itself could be a weapon of survival. While The Great Escape hogged the spotlight just 1 year later, Bogarde's portrayal of Coward has aged surprisingly well. It reminds us that courage wasn't always stoic. It could also be mischievous, playful, and even joyful. Forgotten by time, this film deserves to be rediscovered as a testament to the fact that even in the darkest prisons, laughter could keep a man free. 7. The One That Got Away, 1957. In a surprising twist, one of the finest World War II prison escape films doesn't follow Allied soldiers. It follows a German. The One That Got Away tells the story of Franz von Vera, the only Axis prisoner of war captured in Britain who managed a successful escape back to Germany. Released in 1957, it's a tense, unusual perspective that set it apart from every other war film of its era. At the time, many were skeptical of telling the enemy's story, but audiences quickly recognized the film's universal theme, the sheer human determination to be free. Von Vera, played by Hardy Kruger, is portrayed not as a caricatured villain, but as a man obsessed with survival. We watch him dig tunnels, fake documents, and even attempt escape by hijacking an aircraft. Each failure only hardens his resolve. Critics admired the film's restraint, avoiding propaganda, and focusing instead on the drama of escape itself. Hardy Kruger, himself a German actor who later became a respected international star, brought credibility and nuance to the role. For British audiences in the 1950s, it was a startling reminder that bravery and desperation were not confined to one side of the war. Over time, however, the film slipped from public consciousness, overshadowed by Allied-focused classics. Yet its importance cannot be overstated. It remains one of the few films of its kind to humanize the other side without excusing the politics of the war. Forgotten today, The One That Got Away is a reminder that the desire for freedom is a universal language, spoken even by those once called enemies. 6. The Captive Heart, 1946. Released just 1 year after the war ended, The Captive Heart carried a weight of immediacy that later films couldn't replicate. The wounds of World War II were still raw, and audiences weren't looking for glamour. They wanted truth. This British drama, directed by Basil Dearden, gave them exactly that. At its center is a powerful twist. A Czech officer, fleeing Nazi persecution, assumes the identity of a dead British soldier to survive inside a German POW camp. What unfolds isn't just an escape story. It's a meditation on identity, loyalty, and the fragile bonds of trust in a place designed to crush the human spirit. Unlike the purely mechanical escape plots of later films, The Captive Heart intertwines personal anguish with the larger struggle for freedom. Critics in 1946 praised its raw, emotional honesty, while veterans recognized the subtle details, the letters home, the guarded conversations, the flickers of hope amid despair. The film even earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Screenplay. But as Hollywood's louder, more action-driven war dramas began to dominate, The Captive Heart slowly faded from the mainstream. Today, it stands as one of the earliest and most poignant POW films ever made. Its emotional resonance, rooted in both survival and stolen identity, reminds us that escape wasn't always about tunnels or daring breakouts. Sometimes it was about clinging to a borrowed name, a fragile disguise, and the hope that tomorrow might still come. 5. The Cross of Lorraine, 1943. Hollywood's first major attempt at a POW escape drama came surprisingly early, in the middle of the war itself. The Cross of Lorraine, released in 1943, starred Jean-Pierre Aumont and Gene Kelly in one of his rare dramatic roles, far removed from the musicals that would later define him. It was a fierce, unpolished look at French prisoners resisting their Nazi captors long before the war had even ended. The film wears its wartime urgency on its sleeve. There is no subtlety here, just raw anger and unfiltered patriotism. The prisoners are beaten, humiliated, and pushed to breaking points, yet they resist. In an era when audiences needed hope, The Cross of Lorraine delivered defiance, showing men who refused to surrender their dignity no matter the brutality they faced. Critics at the time found it both stirring and harsh. Some American audiences weren't prepared for such graphic portrayals of cruelty in 1943. Yet the film resonated deeply in Europe, especially with French expatriates who saw their own struggle reflected on screen. Over time, however, The Cross of Lorraine slipped into obscurity. Its wartime immediacy meant it wasn't revisited in the same nostalgic light as later POW classics. Still, when rewatched today, it stands out for its emotional intensity and its daring decision to put Gene Kelly, a man known for charm and song, into a role of suffering and rage. It is a film that deserves a second life, not just as cinema, but as testimony to the spirit of resistance. 4. The Mackenzie Break, 1970. By the late 1960s, the prison escape film was beginning to feel predictable. Audiences had seen the tunnels, the disguises, and the daring breakouts. Enter The Mackenzie Break, a British thriller that turned the genre on its head by shifting perspective, not to Allied prisoners escaping German camps, but to German U-boat officers plotting a breakout in Scotland. Released in 1970, the film brought a fresh edge to the genre. Brian Keith plays the British intelligence officer assigned to stop the escape, while Helmut Greim leads the German prisoners in a deadly game of wits. Unlike earlier films that leaned into camaraderie and unity, The Mackenzie Break thrives on tension, mistrust, and psychological warfare. Every scene crackles with the question, who will outsmart whom? Critics praised its taut pacing and moral ambiguity. For the first time, viewers were forced to see the war from both sides inside a POW camp. The German officers are cunning, ruthless, and disturbingly sympathetic in their sheer determination to break free. This duality made the film stand apart, though it also prevented it from reaching the mass appeal of Hollywood's patriotic blockbusters. Over the years, The Mackenzie Break has become a forgotten gem, rarely broadcast and scarcely mentioned among the classics. Yet its unique perspective, portraying the escape efforts of the enemy as a thriller in their own right, makes it deeply relevant today. In an era when audiences seek moral complexity in war stories, this film feels strikingly modern. Its rediscovery would remind us that war wasn't just about sides. It was about survival, cunning, and the endless human hunger for freedom. 3. Le Caporal Épinglé, The Elusive Corporal, 1962. Jean Renoir, one of cinema's great humanists, rarely touched war films. But when he did, the results were unforgettable. In 1962, he released Le Caporal Épinglé, known in English as The Elusive Corporal, a French POW escape film unlike any other. Where most prison escape dramas lean into tension, Renoir's film offers something gentler: irony, warmth, and an unshakable belief in humanity, even behind barbed wire. The story follows a French corporal during World War II who makes repeated, often disastrous escape attempts from German captivity. Unlike the meticulous precision of British escape tales, these attempts are messy, improvised, and sometimes comically doomed. Renoir isn't mocking the prisoners, though. He's celebrating their stubborn refusal to give up. Even in failure, there's dignity. Critics at the time admired Renoir's touch, though some audiences were puzzled. Where was the nail-biting suspense? The narrow escapes? Instead, Renoir offered quiet observation and understated charm. For him, the true story wasn't just whether the corporal escaped, but how persistence itself became a form of victory. The film faded quickly outside of France, overshadowed by louder international releases. But today, it feels strikingly fresh. In an era where audiences are drawn to character-driven war stories rather than spectacle, The Elusive Corporal resonates more than ever. It reminds us that war wasn't always about grand triumphs. It was about small rebellions, everyday courage, and the laughter that could exist even in the bleakest captivity. Renoir's film deserves revival, not as a tale of victory, but as a meditation on the resilience of the human spirit. 2,000 Women, 1944. At the height of the war, when Britain's film industry was balancing propaganda with storytelling, 2,000 Women emerged as a rare gem. Released in 1944, it told the story of British women interned in a German camp in occupied France, a subject Hollywood and most of Europe had largely ignored. Instead of soldiers digging tunnels, here we saw civilians caught in the machinery of war, their courage tested in quieter, more perilous ways. The film begins with women adjusting to life inside a bleak internment camp. But the real drama arrives when downed RAF airmen are smuggled in. Suddenly, the women face impossible choices: risk their lives to hide the airmen, or play it safe and ensure their own survival. Their decision to help transforms the story into a tense escape thriller, with ordinary women becoming unlikely resistance fighters. At release, 2,000 Women was applauded in Britain for its bravery in spotlighting a little-seen aspect of the war. Yet after 1945, the film disappeared from international circulation, eclipsed by male-dominated POW epics that audiences craved. In time, even its significance as a cultural landmark, placing women at the heart of a war escape narrative, was forgotten. Today, it feels like one of the most progressive World War II films of its era. Long before cinema celebrated women in resistance movements, 2,000 Women gave them agency, courage, and a voice. It deserves a comeback not only as an escape thriller, but as a pioneering work that challenged the norms of its time. 1. Escape to Athena, 1979. By the late 1970s, the POW escape genre had largely run its course. Audiences had lived through The Great Escape, Stalag 17, and countless British dramas. So when Escape to Athena arrived in 1979, it tried something bold, fusing the familiar war escape template with pulp adventure, heist thrills, and star-studded spectacle. Set on a Nazi-occupied Greek island, the film follows prisoners who hatch a daring escape while simultaneously plotting a treasure heist. Roger Moore leads the cast, joined by David Niven, Elliot Gould, and even Telly Savalas. It had all the ingredients for a blockbuster: action, humor, romance, and intrigue. But upon release, critics were merciless. Many accused it of being tonally confused, unsure whether it was a war epic, a comedy, or an adventure romp. Audiences, too, were puzzled. The film underperformed, slipping quickly into obscurity. Yet, with modern eyes, Escape to Athena feels less like a failure and more like a daring experiment ahead of its time. Today's audiences, accustomed to genre-blending epics like Inglourious Basterds or Kelly's Heroes, would find its mix of heist caper and POW escape surprisingly entertaining. Yes, it's uneven. Yes, it sometimes stumbles. But hidden inside its flaws is something unique: a refusal to treat the escape genre as sacred. Instead, it embraces spectacle, mischief, and adventure. And in that risk-taking spirit, Escape to Athena deserves another chance. As the credits roll, you realize sometimes forgotten films aren't failures. They're misfits waiting for the right generation to understand them. These 12 forgotten prison escape films remind us that courage doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers through tunnels, disguises, or even laughter in captivity. Each deserves a second chance to shine on our screens. Which one would you bring back first? Comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more rediscoveries.